Hello there, you're welcome along. NFL is coming to Dublin, as you know. This is a proper regular season game, so it's historic. The Steelers were here back in '97. That was a preseason game against Chicago, but this is a different ball game altogether. So Pittsburgh Steelers against the Minnesota Vikings, 2:30 Sunday at Croke Park. There are a couple of different aspects to this. There are an estimated 350,000 NFL fans in Ireland. It has grown, I think, since the 80s or so. Like Roy Keane always talks about watching it in the 80s and getting into it then. So like NFL in Ireland is a real thing, and there is real NFL fandom. And so for 350,000 plus people, this is just a very cool thing. It's an iconic event. It's in Croke Park. It's to be enjoyed. Lots of people love the sport and probably can't believe it's coming to Dublin. Then for others, there is an unease, be it politics or values, or it's kind of muddied listening to different people talk over the last couple of weeks. Different people are making different points. So, for instance, you have brilliant people like David Hickey, the former Dublin footballer. He would, as well as touching on Palestine, he would make the argument that NFL values are just the polar opposite to everything that the GAA aspires to and espouses, and therefore why are we hosting them at our home? They're everything we don't like about life, about sport, values, capitalism, greed, you name it. Awful. So why is Croke Park wrapping its arms around it? That's one of the points David Hickey makes. And then there's the more kind of overtly political point, which is, for some people, NFL is America, and even more debatable perhaps, but NFL is Trump. Not just America, it's Trump. And so like last week, the American journalist Dave Zirin was touring the country, and he was kind of informing or urging like an informed consent if you're doing this, you know, and America is, the NFL is planting its flag. I don't know exactly what he meant by planting its flag. What does that actually mean? You know, so we've invited Dave on the show just to tease this out a bit, because it does sound very serious and significant, but in real terms, what does it all mean? What are the issues Ireland Inc. needs to be aware of before welcoming in the NFL? So Dave Zirin, brilliant journalist, he's done lots of great work from The Nation magazine, amongst other places, is going to join us later on. So that's kind of the broad strokes plan. Happy to say Will is here in studio, an NFL fan, one of the 350,000.
One of the chosen few, Joe.
Indeed. And then Shane Brennan's part of our team, has been part of our team from day one, as many of you know. He hosts, as well as working with us, the Irish NFL show. He is an NFL behemoth. And the one day he was out of the office. The one day. But he said on his day off, you just dial me up. I'm there. How you doing?
How you doing, Joe? It is typical that, you know, Dublin being sort of Disneyland for NFL enthusiasts, that I've decided to come on the podcast. The one day I found myself in London. So, but no, good to hop on to talk about a sort of specialist subject.
Very good. No, it's good to have you here. So, well, a couple of different aspects. Just to put this international game in context, NFL have been doing these matches outside of the US since '07. So we're nearly 20 years into the experiment, and obviously other sports are following suit. La Liga heading to the US is a train in motion. Ireland just the fifth country, Shane, outside the US to host an NFL match. England, Mexico, Germany, Brazil, and now up we come. We're just the fifth European city, and it's just part of the trend. 3 matches in London in October. They go to Berlin in November. Madrid is going to host Spain's first ever match in November, as well as Berlin. Australia is going to stage a game in 2026. I hadn't realised, by the way, London has staged 39 games. Could that be right? 39 games?
Yeah, it's getting hard to keep track of, especially when they have 3 per year. I think the Jaguars have played there each of the last 10 years. They started playing when the Giants played against the Dolphins in '07, as you said. So, like, I mean, they played games in Twickenham as well at some point over the last decade. London was sort of the only sort of international home of NFL. But since the world has sort of returned to normality after the pandemic, the NFL has really set its sights on a lot of other markets. What's interesting about Ireland is by far the smallest market that the NFL has played in. Most of those other countries are large European countries with 50 million plus people, Mexico and Brazil as well, obviously, having connections with the American continent at large. So it's unusual for Ireland, a country with a population smaller than that of many American cities, to host such a big event here.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that raises the interesting question: why then? So such a small market. I guess people will look at Steelers and the Rooney family and see that as a major driver. Though you mentioned to me just before we came on air, I had missed this. I didn't read the Fine Gael manifesto. Hands up. Okay, I didn't. But it was in the Fine Gael manifesto. I mean, look, we want to fix housing eventually, but it was in the Fine Gael manifesto to get an NFL game to Dublin.
Yeah, in fairness to that mention the Fine Gael manifesto, I think that was sort of written almost kind of as if they knew it was going to happen anyway, because that was the 2024 manifesto. This game has been in the planning since the Steelers announced international marketing rights in Ireland, which is sort of the NFL's weird way of carving up the world so that not everybody's fighting over everything. That, there are some teams assigned to Britain, some teams assigned to Ireland, France, Germany, wherever. The Steelers are the first team to sort of put Ireland on the NFL's map. And in fairness, they have a large Irish American history. The Rooney family are very big in the Irish American community. They founded the Steelers and have owned the team since the start. And Dan Rooney who was the team's owner and president, was once America's ambassador to Ireland during the Obama years. So the connection is there, and it's very much a personal thing for them that probably put Ireland ahead in the queue. Like, to be honest with you, if it wasn't for the fact that the Steelers really wanted to make this game happen, I don't think we would see an NFL game being played in Croke Park as soon as we are seeing it. Like, I think when it was originally announced, I remember talking to Brett Gosper, former head of World Rugby, who is now head of NFL International, or works with NFL International. And I remember asking him, was like, well, where are we in the queue here? And he was like, oh, well, Spain and France and Germany are already very well advanced in the conversation. Ireland was only starting then in 2023. But I think between the Irish government making a push for it here, as Fine Gael said in their manifesto, the Steelers making a push for it, this has become incredibly quick, from less than 2 years ago when the Steelers and the GAA jointly put this on the map as something there was an aspiration for them for it to actually happen.
Okay, interesting. In terms of what it means for Dublin, there is much planned across the week. There's free fan events across the city from Thursday, Dublin Castle involved, Dublin City Hall involved, a 3-day tailgate event at Merrion Square that concludes with a watch party Sunday for those not at Croke Park. Steelers have opened a shop in Dublin as well, which will remain open all season. I haven't felt the NFL presence yet, Will. I don't know if you have. You cross the city a bit more than me.
And this kind of like, it used to be the Well beside Stephen's Green. It's now this rotating superstore. It was the Lions superstore, then it was the Oasis superstore. Now it's the Pittsburgh Steelers superstore. It's like a travelling circus. Whoever comes into town lays claim to this kind of prime location. There's loads of flags up. There's NFL flags up on O'Connell Bridge. There's like NFL flags up in Rathmines outside Roddy Boland's pub. Like, so it's reaching its tentacles into the suburban areas. Haven't seen that many supporters around on my cross-city walks to work, but I'm imagining that as it gets a little closer, a good few will come in. I'll be interested to see the breakdown of the crowd. I'm going to be there on Sunday.
Well, I saw estimated 30,000 international visitors.
Yeah,
so it's been put out there.
Yeah, because there was a huge scramble for tickets. Like, I know loads of people trying to get them. It was kind of like first come first serve, and a lot of people locked out the prices. It was some were quite expensive. I think I'm paying like almost €300 for my ticket, and it's not like a halfway line kind of unbelievable view either. Like, so it was pricey.
And that's not ticket out. That's directly.
No, that's directly. That's directly. Yeah. So
steep.
Yeah, it is. But I think the excitement is building. Like, it's great that we're getting like a Steelers Vikings is a very good game to get. Like, both teams were in the playoffs last year. I remember some of the early London years, like, the teams were going over weren't great. Like, the Jacksonville Jaguars are now like the designated London team. Anyone watching NFL will know they're kind of a tortured franchise. It's not going to be putting loads of bums on seats outside of just a novelty value. Whereas getting the Steelers, Aaron Rodgers, the Vikings, who've been very successful over the last couple of years, that's a good first game to get.
Yeah, they are. I think level with the Patriots, Shane. Joint most numbers of Super Bowls, like storied franchise, Rooney family prominent, etc.
Yeah, the Steelers are definitely a blue chip franchise of the NFL. They've been around since before the NFL AFL merger, which is when the Super Bowl era began. They predate that. They won 4 Super Bowls in the 70s and 2 in the 2000s, and with that they will bring a large fan base. So like, if you were to list it, like the 5 biggest NFL franchises, they're up there in terms of the breadth of fan base they have across America. And I think you will see that. I think to Will's point, or I guess to your point about whether you felt the NFL fever, most of the events and most of the fans and even the 2 teams are flying over. All begins on Thursday. Thursday is the kind of at the start of when it all begins to happen. And what's really quirky about this one as well is, unlike any other city that's hosted an American football or an NFL event, there are official meetups and events being planned by teams who aren't actually playing here. The Kansas City Chiefs are hosting stuff officially called the Chiefs House, and they're bringing their own mascot from Thursday onwards. And even the Packers are getting in the action, hosting their own fan event. So it's going to go from sort of 0 to 100 real quick. Certainly by Saturday, I think you'd expect a lot of fans. When the tickets were announced, I think the estimation from NFL UK and Ireland said a third were American, a third were British or European, and then a third were Irish. That breakdown is a little bit unsure because a lot of tickets keep going on sale, and I think that's just a lot of American travel packages that weren't sold. So maybe you'll have a bit more Irish fans be managed to find their way in from there. But yeah, we're expecting waves and waves of fans, particularly from Steeler country in Pennsylvania, arriving from Thursday onwards.
And it bodes well that like the Chiefs, as Shane says, are doing an event here. I think they have marketing rights as well, Shane, do they? And I think the New York Jets as well have had events here in the recent past. Like, so we could be seeing Patrick Mahomes coming over here in the near future, Shane, I'd say, is a possibility. Like, this isn't a one and done thing, I don't think. Like, I know, as you said, it's a small market compared to some of the other countries, but if it goes well, I'd expect to see could it be an annual game?
It's interesting because I was the one who spoke to the Chiefs marketing manager a couple of weeks ago when they said that they want to play in Dublin 2026. And at that point, nobody had said that that a game in Dublin will be a repeated affair. Now, the government and the NFL sort of said, sort of aspirationally, we'd like for this to not be a one-off. But I think the general sense is that, okay, if there's a game here this year, we won't get one next year. We might get one in 2027. It was unusual that the Chiefs came out straight away and said, yeah, we are hearing amongst conversation in the league that there will be a game here in 2026, all going well, of course. And that the Chiefs want to bring their brand to Ireland next year. So that'll be an unusual one. And I think to the point of, you were talking earlier about the fact that the Jaguars have cemented themselves as London's team. I just want to clarify, because I think a lot of people who are following this sort of assume that because the Steelers are first out of the gate and they're trying to make themselves Ireland's team, that we are expecting the Pittsburgh Steelers to play in Dublin every year. I think learning from the mistakes of the Jacksonville Jaguars is the reason why that probably won't happen, because, as Will was alluding to earlier, most of the games that were played in London in the last decade were pretty awful because there were 2 awful teams. The Jags being one of them, they've been awful for a long time. So the NFL now, they're taking central control of a lot of these international games, and they want to spread it around that if there are going to be repeated games in Ireland, Germany, Spain, that it's not going to be the same team coming over every year. It's going to be a mix of different clubs coming over.
Okay.
The original plan was, I think, to have a franchise in London. It was to build up enough interest in London that they might have an international team there. But I think it just became unworkable eventually. So instead of that, it's okay, how do we build our brand internationally? Because American football's only played in America. I know they're trying to expand it into the Olympics with flag football, but it's to kind of sprinkle it around the world. As you listed off these countries, it's going to every corner of the world now. Ireland doesn't really fit that mould. As Shane said, we kind of probably skipped the queue a bit because of some pre-existing relationships and just the way Ireland can kind of, with the American relationship generally, kind of get a few trappings that other countries can't get who are bigger than us. But I think that's the plan now, is to expand it and to have Patrick Mahomes coming next year. So that would be.
And do you know? So I understand the Rooney family and the Steelers might be keen to go to Dublin. Why would the Chiefs want to go to Dublin as opposed to a major European city with big population, Shane?
I think firstly because they can sell a lot of tickets in Croke Park. The fact that they can sell 75,000 tickets at Croke Park probably make it better than going to Tottenham, for example, where they would make the same amount of money per ticket, but the stadium only holds 58, 59,000. Okay. The same, like, I think the Chiefs played in Germany a couple of years ago in Frankfurt, and I think that stadium only held 50-odd thousand. So I was at Croke Park.
They will make money.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeez, I mean, you were talking about the ticket prices that Will was saying. I haven't met anybody who's paid less than €250 for a ticket, and that was for the Hill 16 tickets. I think they were the kind of the cheapest going. Maybe there might be a few who have managed to get better value than that. So there is money to be made, but also each of the 32 NFL teams have a different attitude when it comes to international games. Some traditionally have just been very against it. They hate the idea. They've eventually come around to it, and now all 32 teams, I think there's some sort of regulation or roster encouraging all of them to play internationally. But the Chiefs seem to have realize that they're in a moment here between the fact that they're very successful. People around the world who don't know NFL can name Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. Plus, there's the whole Taylor Swift aspect, which makes them very popular and very easy to sell. It's interesting, like, as much as they're bringing out their Irish mascot, they've done the same in Britain and Germany. They're definitely going to play internationally, a lot. They played in Brazil this year. I think that they're a team who are pushing the boat out to try and get as much international attention as possible. Okay. Probably because, and a part of that as well, a lot of these teams are just maxed out the amount of money they can make in their own markets, because either they're in small parts of America or just the NFL has become so popular in the United States that it's almost like reaching its limit, and that's why it has to expand internationally.
Okay. It's probably the most expensive match ever taking place in Ireland, like with the ticket prices. Like, has there ever been a sporting event that commanded a higher price point than this? Maybe one of the Katie Taylor fights, was pretty expensive. That was a lot smaller though. Yeah. This is 82,000 people. As Shane said, the average ticket price is probably €250. Like, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. Ryder Cup tickets in 2 years will be nuts, I'm sure. Yeah. But you could well be right.
It's mad to think.
Yeah. Just two quick other points on the match itself. I guess Aaron Rodgers is just a huge name. He's 41. He's thrown 7 touchdown passes across his first 3 appearances. So this Steelers season has gone better than his New York season. One of the sport's all-time greats. So he's there. Is there anything else about this match that you want to point people towards?
The Vikings are missing their starting quarterback, JJ McCarthy, who was injured, who's kind of a rookie anyway, so they won't be at their optimum offensively, but they have a wide receiver, Justin Jefferson, who's probably one of the greatest athletes on the planet. He is an absolute freak. He is probably the best wide receiver in the NFL, or one of them, so he's someone to watch out for if you're watching as a casual fan. He would be one of the marquee stars of the NFL. There's a massive interest in Aaron Rodgers. A lot of people probably watched the Netflix documentary. He's 100% on the wane of his career. There was an idea he might be able to snatch one Super Bowl on the way out, but it doesn't appear to be the case. But even the fact that you're going to get to see him live and up close, he still has 1 or 2 moments of game that we've seen in the first 3 weeks this season where he throws his pitch-perfect throw. So if you're sitting like I am behind one of the end zones, you might have a perfect kind of view to take in one of the all-time great quarterbacks. I'm fascinated to actually just watch an NFL game live in a stadium. So different when you're watching it on TV on Red Zone and it's jumping from kind of game to game. Like, to just get a sense of how it's played out strategically on the field will be very interesting. But yeah, Justin Jefferson probably one of the marquee stars in the NFL to watch as well.
Okay. Have you been to an NFL game?
Never.
Because Shane, you've been Super Bowl and probably several others, I'd say. But I'm fascinated to hear what you make of it.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll be bored to tears. No ad breaks, no toilet breaks.
I've been to college football games and they are really, really long when you're in the stadium. Yeah. Like there's one very powerful man with kind of a lanyard on who gets to go out for the TV timeouts, and like he kind of brings everything crashing to a halt when the network says we need another ad break. So it could be a very long in-game. Like, so it starts at 2:30. Like, what time am I going to get out of there at? Probably 6. That's a long time.
It's my worst nightmare. Shane, just to make one point, people may not be aware of, and it is circling back into the political aspect. So if in the Steelers and the Rooney family, you have something kind of palatable to the Irish audience, even those who may be uneasy for various reasons about this game happening at Croke Park, it's probably going under the radar a touch. Because, the Palestinian protests are talking about America Inc., but the Minnesota Vikings owner is Mark Wilf. Now, Mark Wilf, he inherited his wealth. He is chairman of the board of the Jewish Agency for Israel. And what the Jewish Agency for Israel do, in effect, is encourage as much migration and as many settlements as possible in Israel. And they facilitate that, and they do what they can to make that happen. So in what is a very, I think it's fair to say, Palestinian-leaning country right now, you've got somebody who is the chairman of the board for the Jewish Agency of Israel at Croke Park. His team playing, all the ego stroking that goes with it. I think that has gone under the radar a touch, and I suspect it won't for much longer. Is he coming over?
I don't think so. I can't confirm this either way, but the rumours that I hear is that the ownership are just staying away from Ireland for this one, and they might be making the journey over because the Vikings are playing in London next week. But it is an interesting one because I think obviously our perspective on the genocide that is happening in Gaza and the American perspective on whatever phrase that they want to put on it is incredibly different. And of course that frames everything that happens when something big and so obviously and brashly American comes over. But for this aspect, for it to, I guess, be underlooked at is probably based on the fact that they've generally tried to be relatively quiet in the way that they've been supporting Israel, even though like players in the past that have played for the Vikings have worn boots saying "I stand with Israel" shortly after the October 7th attacks, for instance. Um, but I think, even if you look at the investment that the Vikings are putting in sort of fan events, they're hosting a few fan events in Dublin, but not a mega amount. I think they're quite happy to come over, play the game, and move on. But I'm just wondering because, and this is something which hasn't been put to the GAA or the NFL yet, is in light of the connections of the Will family to Israel and to those causes. I mean, one of the other things they're doing as well is they're being very supportive of the Israel flag football team who are trying to qualify for the Olympics in Los Angeles 2028, which, of course, that completely at odds with how we in Ireland view whether Israel should be allowed to participate in sport, considering what its government is doing. Um, it's gone under the radar because I think people know this about the Vikings ownership, but it's not publicly, they're not very public about it. I think if you asked, 10 things to tell me about the Vikings, it wouldn't necessarily be on your list. Whereas the New England Patriots, for instance, everybody knows that Robert Kraft has a lot of business dealings in Israel, and he's also supportive of the flag football team in Israel, and some former Patriots players have been very supportive of Israel since retirement as well. Like that's a much more public thing, whereas they've been much more quiet about it in Minnesota.
Okay.
But one aspect that hasn't been asked enough, and I think there will be people from the NFL and GA who probably will be asked in the next couple of days, is what happens if somebody inside the stadium does decide to show their displeasure at what's happening and display a Palestinian flag. I was in a game in Tottenham 2 years ago when the crowd was asked to stand for a minute's silence in October 2023 for those who died in October 7th attacks. And immediately what happened is most of the crowd there who were there from London started shouting "Free Palestine." And what happened is I was in a bunch of Baltimore fans, as it was, who had flown over from America, and they were incensed. And I think some of them were probably, I felt at the time that if they were beside somebody who was screaming "Free Palestine," that they could have potentially turned violent. And I'm not saying that's going to happen here in Dublin, but we can't overlook the possibility of people bringing Palestine flags inside the stadium. I don't know how it's going to be dealt with. No one has asked the question of that yet of the NFL as to how, that would be policed, I guess is the only word I can think of. And as well as that, there's, in terms of how the Americans traveling over would respond to that. Because in fairness, the level of attention on this hasn't crossed into any of the other American football games that happen in Dublin. Like the college football game happens and everyone just sort of enjoys the music and the pageantry. And this aspect of it hasn't been talked about. Obviously, the NFL brings with it another level of spotlight and a greater potential for these things to flare up. So I would be interested to know whether there is a contingency plan for that to happen, because I know we are expecting protests to happen around Dublin and outside the stadium. Inside the stadium, I'm just not sure.
Yeah, I suspect somehow we'll find out. All right, fellas, let's chat next week and see what you make of the experience. Will, pleasure.
Thanks, Joe.
Shane, thank you for calling in on your day off. This is not a day in lieu.
Oh, no. Well, if I talk about American football, I'll do that for free. That's no problem.
Now, happy to say Dave Zirin is with us. He is of The Nation magazine. They are committed to progressive journalism. J.D. Vance took aim at them very recently. He's their sports editor. Dave is long-time journalist, various planes as well, documentary maker, which is related to what we're talking about today, and a man of many talents. And he was obviously in Ireland, as lots of you know, last week on Tour de Force. You had a good time under the circumstances. You're very welcome.
Well, did I have a good time in Dublin and Belfast? May I live there, please? Can I find a long-lost grandfather from Galway so I can apply for citizenship? That's my way of saying yes. Not only did I have a very good time, but I felt like I could breathe for the first time in, I don't know, a decade.
Yeah, these are interesting times. For the purpose of our conversation here, can we approach this in two parts? Because it's kind of unwieldy. Part one, let's diagnose the ills of the NFL, which is a specialist subject of yours. And then number two, which I think was the point of your visit, like, let's tease out then, what does this in real terms mean for Ireland, or mean for Croke Park, or mean for the GAA, if anything at all? So,
absolutely.
Part one, diagnosing the ills of the NFL. This may be relatively easy for you. Where do you want to start? I don't think the majority.
It's more, where do you want to start? Because I can, it's like chapter and verse here, man.
Yeah.
It's like one of those books where it's a volume of assorted authors, and so you can start at chapter 4, chapter 1, chapter 5. You can make your own choice. Do I want to start with the concussion chapter? And we can talk about Rudy Johnson, a former Pro Bowler who killed himself yesterday with symptoms that they strongly suspect are linked to CTE. He was 45 years old and suffering from depression, headaches, and all of the things that are markers of a post-concussive syndrome, not to mention youth suicide, young suicide of former NFL players, which has almost 100% invariably been linked in post-autopsies to head injuries. We could talk about that if you want. We could talk about the links between the National Football League and U.S. militarism, both historically and in the present day, like being actual aggravators for U.S. imperial adventures around the world, really dating back to the start of the really 20th century, but more in earnest since Vietnam. We could talk about that if you like, or we could talk about the moment right now where the National Football League has made a decision to not only bury the brief period of players who stood up against racism in the late 2010s, like Colin Kaepernick, but also the way that they've decided full bore to become supplicants for the Donald Trump administration when they really didn't have to. And they are, in fact, aggravators, not bystanders to our current national nightmare. We could talk about all that stuff. I mean, or, we could talk about the union issues around the sports and the way the players don't have such fewer rights than any other athlete in any other league in the United States. And isn't that interesting that the most powerful, the most corporate behemoth sports entertainment in the whole of the United States also has the weakest labor rights for its players? Gee, I wonder if that's just a coincidence. We could talk about the way the ownership of the NFL actually compose a kind of right-wing cabal of billionaires, almost without exception. And we could talk about one of the exceptions when we talk about Ireland, but almost without exceptions, like hard right-wing billionaire funders who've made a lot of their money from two different areas. Three different areas if you want to count that they're almost all nepotism kids who, earned it the old-fashioned way through inheritance. But they've also earned it through the gambling industrial complex in the United States, the addiction economy, which has brought in untold billions on the backs of largely a youth addiction epidemic right now in gambling that they still push mercilessly throughout their broadcasts. Or the other way they make money, which is through absconding with public funds, which magically turn into private profit when stadiums are built, and those public funds turning into private profit that then becomes money to bankroll far-right organizations. How is that not a form of political money laundering in this country? How is that legal? Part of the reason why it's legal is that we have no campaign finance laws in this country, at least none that provoke restrictions on the wealthy. So, I actually am not done talking, but I will stop right now only out of the good grace and politeness to both your show and you as a host. But please trust me, and I hope your listeners please trust me that if you wanted to, I could do 10 more chapters about the National Football League.
I've no doubt, and people should check out Behind the Shield. It's I don't know if it should be or not, by the way, but it's on YouTube. So I don't know if you see that as a good thing or you're being ripped off, but it is on YouTube if people want to check it out.
I'm so past caring at this point.
So everything you've outlined there, I think there's a general awareness of that in this country, and I guess when we try and examine whether or not it's a good thing that the NFL is coming here and maybe to Croke Park in particular, I'd say everything you've mentioned there falls under the David Hickey complaint. David Hickey, who I know you met obviously last week, a brilliant man. And I guess his strong argument is the GAA, we do not have a single value in common with this corporate monster. Not a single value. So why would we align with it in any way? Mm-hmm. As a convincing argument. It's a really convincing argument for the GAA. For context, for you and people here will know, the GAA over the last, I'd say 15 years has moved into a more corporate space. Some of the matches are pay-per-view, which is very contentious. The stadium has been opened up to Taylor Swift, Oasis, you name it. Games moved aside as a result. So, like, they're making money. Now, they're a non-for-profit, so a lot of that money funnels back to grassroots, and to some extent or other, we make our piece. But the NFL is definitely at the more extreme end of corporate. So there's that, and that's a really strong argument. That's a really strong argument. I wanted to pick your brains on the political aspect, though, because that has been talked about a lot. Like, I think you draw a fairly straight line from NFL Inc. to Donald Trump to America. How fair is that? Could you expand on why NFL equals Trump specifically?
Well, that's a terrific question. First thing I would say to folks is that you have to look at the politics of the NFL as a kind of living organism. Because they're so incredibly popular in the United States, there are two big weights that do exist. One weight is that they tend to bend with the political winds. Like, what is happening politically? We are the NFL. We need to bend with that wind so we can be the profit-making behemoth that we've always been. But there's always also been this counterweight, which is the fact that the people who actually own the teams are to the right of Genghis Khan. And they have billions of dollars that are almost entirely, without exception, unearned, like we said, inherited. So they are attempting to really preserve their place and privilege in society. So those two counterweights have always, I think, been at tension in the NFL, with the right-wing, anti-union, baldly racist, baldly sexist, baldly homophobic side normally gaining sway, with an exception that was truly remarkable in the late 2010s, but even around the Black Lives Matter movement. But even that exception was brought about by player revolt, the largest protests literally in the history of the United States, and the death of the career of Colin Kaepernick, not to mention several others who paid that kind of a price. And when you factor in that there are no guaranteed contracts in the NFL and that the average career is only 3.5 years, that also means that the institutional memory of what occurred in the late 2010s has been already extremely damaged, which actually plays into the whole let's memorialize an open racist in Charlie Kirk at 2/3 of the NFL stadiums as a way of not just NFL owners saying you need to mourn who we care about no matter what he said or thought, but it's also a big middle finger to the players themselves. Like, hey, remember when you had us saying anti-racist things and putting fight racism in the end zone? Well, guess what? This is our guy. And you're going to pay allegiance to him, or you are going to pay with your career. Okay. And of course, that's not an exaggeration in a climate where people are paying for their careers left and right, including a prominent Washington Post journalist for literally just printing the words that man said. Cost her job.
Right.
And one player that I spoke with who was part of that movement, who said to me, they are just trying to memory hole everything we did 10 years ago. I said to him, that's a really important point. Can I quote you for my article? And he said, you can quote my words, but quote my name? He was literally like, Dave, have you looked out your window? No, you can't quote my name.
Yeah.
You know, that's the lovely situation of freedom of speech here in the United States. So I talked about like going with the winds and the fact that most of the owners are really part of a right-wing cabal in the United States of oligarchical inherited wealth. What you have to factor in about this moment right now is that they are both going with the winds and responding to the dictates of their ownership. And that is really a particularly toxic combination that I have never seen in such an extreme form in all my years of covering this directly as a sort of day-to-day political sports writer analyst. It's never been like this to such a degree before. I mean, so You see Roger Goodell doing a thumbs up with Trump in the Oval Office. You see them removing the fight racism words from the end zone during the Super Bowl because Donald Trump decided to actually break all precedent and become the first sitting president to attend a Super Bowl. Presidents had not done that, frankly, out of respect for the Super Bowl as a kind of American space for everybody to just come together and enjoy. Donald Trump cares nothing for such niceties. He says he hates his enemies. He used those lovely words at Charlie Kirk's funeral because that's what everybody wants to hear at a funeral. And when you hate your opponents, you're going to do things that people hate, and you're going to see their hate as a badge of honor. Yeah. And he really lives on hate. That's his lifeblood. And the NFL is assisting in his project of hate by their owners bankrolling and funding him. That's a fact. I've got this. It's roughly by a 9-1 margin. Actually, it might even be worse than that. That was a figure from a few years back. There are also all sorts of ways in the United States to fund candidates without having that be official and out there, because we live in a country awash in what's called dark money, thanks to our Supreme Court. And also, they are combining with him for both a new $1 billion stadium on federal land in Washington, D.C. that Trump had to approve. And also they're going to have the NFL draft party, which is a mammoth event that draws hundreds of thousands of people, to be held on the National Mall in Washington, D.C., the place where Dr. Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. And I guess where before the NFL draft, they'll have Charlie Kirk, a hologram of him, give a speech where he says, I have a dream, and that dream is, black people being locked up in prison and the destruction of the state of Palestine and women submitting to their husbands, and trans people should be lynched. So then maybe we'll get to hear Charlie Kirk's dream as a hologram at that NFL event. I'm joking, of course, sure. But the point of it, and I decry all political violence, because if you actually don't say that, I actually do decry all political violence, but if you don't say that in the United States, to even mount even the slightest criticism of our period of coerced national mourning, they will go after you. They will try to get your job. They will talk to your neighbors. This is the free speech of the United States. The NFL is supporting this. The NFL says football is America. The NFL is coming to Ireland. People in Ireland should be very, very wary about the 2025 flag that the NFL and the United States want to plant in Croke Park.
There's loads in that.
Probably too much.
No. It's fascinating. It's brilliant. It's so interesting. So can I hone in on a point you made? By the way, my position is I'm not a huge NFL fan. I'm not going to the game. And I'm very open to what you're saying. But equally, for instance, the Irish Open in golf is going to trump Doonbeg next year. Now, there's a strong link there. That one is, that one is, majorly contentious in my opinion. So on the NFL, a part of me wonders, though, if you take a slightly longer term view of this, you made the point that it goes with the direction of travel, the political wins. Like, if we take it that the NFL is gross in terms of its capitalist excess, it's like the nightmarish vision of capitalism laid out. I accept that fully. But in terms of how political it is, like, there was a time, and it's a long time ago now, where the Rooney Rule, effective enough or not, but was instigated in 2003 in a bid to increase diversity. Redskins changed their name. I'm not saying, by the way, any of this is done for from the good of hearts, but political expedience, therefore more money. So I wonder, are we mistaken in categorizing the NFL as America Inc. and overtly political as Trump, versus no, this is just capitalism in its rawest form. This is pragmatism. This is if a player commits sexual assault, the outcome really in NFL eyes is dependent not on innocent or guilty, but how good is he, a player. The military will pay us to advertise. The key word there is pay us. And you could argue as well, the military, and especially in America, it's got a place in people's hearts. It is apolitical. it does what the president tells it to do. You know, it's made some horrible interventions around the world. We don't need to lay that out for people, but it was told to do so. It didn't go to Iraq off its own bat. So the military and the people who serve in it, and if they're paying us, NFL, whoa. And you know, is it racist? For sure. But listen, it's America. Everything about America has race running through it. Not to be celebrated, but like it's part of it. And so I just wonder if there's a danger that we, and like, what is it? Did you say NFL is America or football is America? Sure. But like, you know, that's a nice sounding slogan. It's not a legally binding constitution that we hold them to in perpetuity. It's just a thing, you know, it sounds good and Americana and all that kind of stuff. So I just wonder, is there a danger here that the feeling here is so strongly against Trump and what he represents, in my opinion, quite rightly, where America's going in so many ways, quite rightly, that we can take what is, and I'm with David Hickey in this, a very greedy, nasty organization, but we can go too far. We can go too far in saying it's political in the sense that it's aligned with Trump forever. Put it this way, and I know I take your point on the owners, and billionaires are going to vote for Republicans. They want to stay rich. I get that. But, you know, an oil state could come and take over an NFL team, or a weeping woke liberal like yourself might inherit a lot of money and you take over an NFL team. So it's not like it's forever. The NFL is forever tied to these Republican billionaires. So I just wonder, is there a danger we're taking a short-term view here, just in our frustration at the world, and maybe it's a little, and I never thought I'd use this phrase, a little unfair on the NFL?
Yeah, great question. Short answer, no. What we got to understand is that football is the last vestige of a monoculture in the United States. If you look at the audiences for every conceivable entertainment in the U.S., it's splintered, it's small, it's not nearly as influential as it used to be. Name the sport, name the program, name the show. The NFL is the only thing that we have that captures a national audience. When I was growing up, probably several dozen things from, Cheers and LA Law to the World Series, to WrestleMania, a million different things would be like, oh, not a million different things. That's
sure.
Against my argument. Like a dozen different things would be like, oh, the whole nation is going to tune into this right now. Now that's just the National Football League. So when they say football is America, they're also saying really that football is really the only thing left that constitutes a common language, a common religion, if you will, in this country, a common cultural connection, which is why it's so important for people like me and people like yourself to interrogate it constantly, because nothing is more powerful than shaping the American consciousness. So then you do have to ask, well, what is the American consciousness in 2025? And what role does the National Football League have in shaping that consciousness? And if we are going to fight to shift that consciousness, don't we also have to fight to try to shift the NFL? And I would take two of the examples you raised as being in the tradition of trying to shift the NFL, because they won't do it for us. Sure. The Rooney Rule you raised was not because of public relations. It was because of a lawsuit that made it, and coaches, black assistant coaches speaking out, that made it publicly problematic for the NFL. So the NFL didn't care.
No.
The people, black thwarted ambition personified by some brilliant coaches, are the people who made it an issue for the public.
Yeah, I hear you. Does that prove the point, though, that it is malleable? It was a PR exercise, maybe a legal one too, PR, and so they moved.
That's my whole point, though.
Yeah. But
that's my whole point about why people should protest the NFL, and why the long view actually involves not just saying, well, it's this thing, it's also other things. Billionaires are going to billionaire, racists are going to racist. We shouldn't reject it. I'm not even arguing to reject it. I'm arguing to try to reclaim as much of it as we can, and to reject what's disgusting about it and figure out how it can change, precisely because it's so culturally important. Second, you mentioned, like, for example, the Washington team name. They were going to hold on to that name. You were going to have to pry that name out of their cold, dead hands.
Sure.
People had been protesting that starting in the 60s. Nothing had made a difference. The only thing that made it matter this time, the only reason why it changed, and all the leading Native American organizations that have protested around this will say to you exactly what I am saying to you. That didn't happen because of us. That happened because after George Floyd was killed, the pressure was so intense that FedEx said, we will no longer fund your stadium.
Yes.
Unless you change the name of this. And then Dan Snyder, this is a really important part of it. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. But he then looked to his fellow owners and he was like, we're not going to let FedEx bully me into changing our beautifully racist name. And then the story broke that Dan Snyder had been hiring private investigators to snoop for dirt around other fellow owners. Now, that was their bridge too far, not the decades and decades of racism. So Dan Snyder had no support in the owner's box. He was never going to get that new stadium we discussed in D.C. because he was so hated in Washington, D.C. And FedEx was more freaked out by George Floyd than the concerns of the American Psychiatric Association and the effects on Native mascotry on Native kids. So it's just to tell that whole story.
Yeah.
Really important about how these things happen.
Yeah.
In the first place.
Yeah. So again, I'm not saying the NFL is admirable, but you could argue that equates to money over politics. Money is number one.
No, because politics and money in this country are utterly interchangeable. So if you're not politically pressuring the money, you're not even doing politics in the United States at this point. I really wish that wasn't the case. Yeah. But nothing in the U.S. right now is about debate or highfalutin ideals of the Constitution. It's all about, can you leverage the money?
Yes.
Not. And the NFL, by the way, has led the way culturally on that very consciousness, which is yet another reason why we have to take it seriously.
Yes.
And not just see it as, well, just another entertainment, or even like this is just like, the golf tournament being hosted at Trump's course. As something that I obviously would also find sort of a disgusting act of supplicancy to this administration and a grift, the way he's profiting off the presidency, all the things we can say about that. The NFL, because of the monocultural aspect that we talked about earlier, is decidedly in a different category. And then the second thing is the other owner of the team, Vikings.
Yeah.
Mark Wolf.
That is a problem.
People can say if they want to, I'm being too conspiratorial, to this, to that. Give me a break. I am not in the slightest. Mark Wolf heads up, a lot of NFL owners are Zionists. A lot of NFL owners give money to pro-Israeli organizations. A lot of NFL owners could not care less that there's a genocide going on in Gaza. Mark Wolf is more than that. He's the chairman of the board of an organization called the Jewish Agency for Israel, who's explicit, and remember, chairman of the board, not a funder, not this guy in the background, chairman of the board on their website. Their explicit goal is, how do we keep a Jewish demographic majority in the area that we conclude to be Israel? So you have a place that, because of the shared history of colonialism, etc., has a historic, deep, deep bond with the Palestinian people. And bringing in Mark Wolf to plant that flag and say, yeah, these politics are now part of the Irish landscape, because the NFL is part of the Irish landscape, because the NFL having a permanent place at Croke Park is part of the Irish landscape. All of that is political.
Yeah.
And that we have to confront and not ignore.
To be honest with you, in the kind of dying tradition of debating, I'm devil's advocating some of your points, and we're teasing them out, and it's really it's helpful. On the presence of the Vikings and Mark Wilf, I will not do that. He should be nowhere near here. He should be not a million miles here.
You're so right. But the point I want to make is they know that too. This is government by trolling.
Do you know when? Because I know Dan Rooney kind of instigated this maybe 3 years ago, which predates October 7th. Do you have any idea when the Vikings were chosen as the team, out of interest?
I don't know that, but I do think, as you well know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. The displacement, of course,
Sure.
Before October 7th, it was the most brutal year for Palestinians in decades. That was before October 7th. And that Mark Wolf's alignment with these politics go very deep and go through his family. And I really want people to realize, though, that they are trying to be, this is not unintentional. They are absolutely trying to be too cute by half.
Yeah. I can't pick a hole in what he's doing here. or that team are doing here under the circumstances it goes so against how this country in the main feels about the situation. And yeah, that aspect of this is horrible. There's just no other way around it.
Yeah.
So,
as is the death yesterday of Rudy Johnson, someone who I interviewed once. I'm still very shook up by this.
Yeah, I can imagine. Look, it's an awful organization in many ways. I guess and that's where the David Hickey argument is really convincing. How much we should take the NFL as Trump. That's what I wanted to tease out with you. So do you think in a world in 5, 6, 7 years, if there's a Democratic government and a Democratic president, and maybe by some miracle in the Middle East, a two-state solution is in the process of happening, which is not, this is really hypothetical. Would this be as poisonous in your eyes coming to Dublin then?
It's so tough to answer that question because I'm not a conspiracy theorist. People should know that about me. They can look me up to know I'm not some nut falling off the tree. I think if I had to bet, I would say that we are, for the short term, done with any kind of era of free and fair elections in the United States. Done.
Okay.
So that's one thing. We are in an age of either explicit or implicit dictatorship. Nobody is acting in power in the United States like they will ever have to face a legitimate vote again. Okay. And the second thing is that what has happened to Gaza has already removed the basis of a two-state solution. It literally just doesn't exist. So that's what Ireland's going to have to deal with in the years ahead when they decide, do we want a dictatorship that facilitated a genocide to come to our country? Because I think in the short term, that is our permanent state of affairs.
Okay. So you're drawing that line. NFL equates to that for you, no question.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They're the one. I mean, I think anybody who cares about this country right now would not be waving the flag and smiling and giving a thumbs up to somebody who is putting the Constitution in a coffin. Yes.
Okay. We could talk for another 20 minutes. You have to go. So, short and sweet. Short and sweet. But thank you so much.
Anytime.
It's great to get your perspective on it. Dave Zirin, thanks, Dave.
Thank you. And also, in all seriousness, thank you to the amazing people of Dublin and Belfast. I'm going to come back as soon as humanly possible next year. I want to do an article, if not a book, about the Bohemian soccer team. And, hopefully I can come back and talk about that sometime.
Okay. Well, look, you're a welcome guest here. We'd love to have you in when you're back. Thanks so much. We'll let you go. See ya.
Bye, buddy.
And there you go. That was Dave Zirin of The Nation magazine. We would have loved more time with him because it's complicated business to tease out, but busy man at the moment. I'm very curious for how people are feeling about all this. If you want to email in, would love to read them. indosportpodcast@independent.ie. He just makes a very compelling case. There's no two ways about it. It's kind of near impossible to argue with much of what he says. Maybe there's this, how overtly political, how overtly Trumpian it is versus just money first above all else. Maybe there is room for debate there, but regardless, it's kind of hard to feel like some great force for good is pitching up in Croke Park on Sunday. Whatever the rationale behind the way it behaves, it's hard to feel like there's much to admire about the organisation. Of all people, it would be fascinating to hear Jarlath Burns pressed on this, actually. I haven't really seen him say much about it, but maybe that day will come. At some stage he'll be asked about it. Regardless, it's happening 2:30 on Sunday. So that was Dave Zirin. We wanted to bring you his perspective on the show, see what you made of it. Again, indosportpodcast@independent.ie is where you can send your emails. I tried to tease out a few things with him, devil's advocate here and there. So hopefully you enjoyed the chat. That is us for today. Tomorrow, Thursday, Will is bringing you some rugby chat. We'll be back for bits and bobs on Friday. Thanks, everyone.